Welcome to the Infinity Bros podcast, the only podcast that is perfectly balanced as all things should be. Today, we have a wonderful show for you. I am your host, Robbie Sauter. This is the first time I'm going to be hosting, so bear with me. I'm going to do my best. But we have a special guest with us today as well, and he's going to introduce himself. He is the one, the only, Mark Jones.
I didn't know I was going to be a special guest. I'm both a contributor to Infinity Bros and a special guest. I'm delighted.
You're who the people really come to see. You're it.
Oh, yes.
You're the big ticket.
I'm what everyone's here for. Yep, that's me. I'm really here to rate you and, score you so then I can bring it back to the bros and see if you're worthy down the line. That's why they hired me. I wasn't aware of that. Is that more intimidating or scary? Could you imagine if we did that? Like we were like that, like hardcore about it, where like we had one of us to rate and score us for hosting.
I feel like that's what some of our Patreon subscribers, I feel like that is their job as a Patreon subscriber, is to rate how we do. And then eventually we'll start killing off the weakest link.
We're going to kill them off, not Survivor it, and like vote each other off.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
It's not going to be like Survivor where it's voted off. I feel like the Patreon subscribers will decide. And they will just hunt that person down and get rid of them.
Oh, so they do all the dirty work.
They do all the dirty work. So this is a really good plug. If you want to hear a wonderful 45-minute discussion of love and happiness and just all out good humor, subscribe to our Patreon. Me and Mark had a very nice, long, wide range of discussions for about 40 something minutes on our Patreon. And if you subscribe, I believe the first, I believe it's $3, $5, or $8 a month, and you can subscribe and get exclusive content from the Infinity Bros. All right.
And subscribing helps keep the lights on.
Yeah.
Websites aren't cheap.
If you want me to feed my children, if you want me to feed my children, please subscribe. Please subscribe.
I just imagine now we have a Patreon ad where it's, like those dog commercials.
In the eyes of the angel.
And it's not pictures of your kids. It's just you looking sad.
Yeah, it's just me looking sad with all of my Funko Pops. Like,
yes, yep.
Robbie had to sell his Funko Pops.
Yeah. Well, $1 a day will help you feed Robbie's children.
I'm all in on this. Like, I'm all in on that. Like, you can guilt people into a lot of things. Anyways, you didn't come here to hear us talking about guilting you into a bunch of things. You came here to get our reviews, our reactions to House of the Dragon, episode 1, the new series about Game of Thrones, but not about Game of Thrones, if that makes any sense. The series that said, hey, you like dragons? You like Daenerys Targaryen? Here's dragons and a girl that looks a lot like Daenerys Targaryen. And that's it. That's the show, essentially. That is what you came here to talk about. That is what we are going to talk about. We're going to review it, spoil it, give our initial thoughts and reactions to it. So, Mark, I wanted to start this off with and maybe this is a two-part question. Maybe it's a 2 rating question, which I suppose we should give our rating system right here.
Here on the Infinity Bros podcast, everything is ranked from a 0 to 6 point scale. 0 meaning horrible, and 6 meaning absolutely excellent. If all of the Infinity Bros rank something a 6, it gets an infinity step.
I want to know what your rating of Game of Thrones, the original, is.
Oh, man. See, that one's tough because, like, I loved it all the way until, like, the last 2 episodes.
Okay.
And, like, I haven't watched it in a bit. I can't remember if it was the last 2 episodes where it kind of went downhill, or it was just the last episode where it's like, well, clearly they just, like, soft tossed it in, the writers, to just get it over with. And I know they even came out and kind of confirmed that's what they did. But overall, I would still have to give this series a 6 out of 6. I think it was fresh story, fresh storytelling, great acting, and clearly HBO put money into that series to make it look good and then sound like they did a great job. So 6 out of 6 for the whole Game of Thrones series.
Right. I'm trying to find the names of the men that were behind the last couple seasons of Game of Thrones. I'm blanking on
and washed from the internet.
I am blanking on their names, and
they were so bad that the Star Wars show that they were going to do got taken away from them.
That's what I wanted to. It was David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, creators of blockbuster Game of Thrones on HBO, are reportedly stepping away from their deal with Disney Lucasfilms for Star Wars movies, so they can instead focus on their partnership with Netflix. So essentially, they made an excuse saying, "No, we're going to go to Netflix." Yeah, you're going to go to Netflix instead of doing Disney Star Wars. I highly doubt that.
Kathleen Kennedy is like, "Nope, you're not going to do this anymore."
Right. So I think. So I wanted to get your. So what did you say your rating was again? I'm sorry.
6 out of 6 for
6 out of 6. Okay. So I think of Game of Thrones, and I think a lot of people think of Game of Thrones this way. Have you seen the picture on the internet where it's 3 parts of a horse, and it's all drawn, it's drawn really, really well. It's drawn really, really well.
It's stick figure.
And the third one's like a stick figure. That's how I feel about Game of Thrones. So I would give
stick figure.
The stick figure starts halfway through season 7, in my opinion.
Oh, okay.
So the stick figure starts for me. I believe it's season 7. It might all be season 8, but I believe it's season 7 when a lot of our main protagonists get stuck in the middle of that ice lake, and all the undead. Yeah, they're all surrounding them. That's when it starts going, this doesn't make sense. And it's not that initial scene. It's then that a raven flies, gets to, I believe it's King's Landing maybe that they get to, or it's a very far away place. Westeros is not a small place. Flies all the way there, and then Daenerys Targaryen on her dragon flies all the way back.
Uh-huh.
And these guys aren't dead, and
we're supposed to assume that the raven got there in enough time for her to get to there at that exact moment.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and she got there at the exact moment that she needed to get there.
That's filmmaking, baby.
That's where, the argument could be made that in a movie that would probably be what happens. In a series that was known for long, drawn out sequences, hour-long episodes, really, really good storytelling. That's where I think the ball started to roll downhill, and things started to get faster and more rushed and more rushed. And I wanted to get to this. George R.R. Martin came out on August 11th saying that he was kept out of the loop on the last few seasons of Game of Thrones. So the original creator.
Yeah, because wasn't there a point where he wasn't even finished with that storyline? And that's
right. And I don't think he's finished.
Kind of left out. Yeah.
Yeah, he hasn't finished still, I believe. Because he went and wrote House of the Dragon, and did some other Game of Thrones projects, but hasn't actually finished the Song of Fire and Ice. So then they just completely shut him out, is what he's saying, or is what he said to Variety.com with the story here. And we'll put that in the show notes. I believe that's a thing that we do. And he said he didn't know what was going on. He said, you have to ask Dan and David. Dan and David are the guys who are in charge of it. So the writer that, got them through those 6 seasons in, incredible 6 seasons, had everyone on the edge of their seats every single Sunday night waiting for Game of Thrones, was then just cut out of season 7 and 8, where I think most people would agree that's when the show started to go downhill. And because, and maybe and some people probably remember this differently, but Game of Thrones took the world by storm. Everyone was watching Game of Thrones. And then when it ended, it was just like oh, that's disappointing. And we all moved on instead of like no one was that sad once it ended because the ending wasn't as incredible or as fulfilling as the entire story had been. So it's wild that George R. R. Martin would be cut out of such a thing. And I wanted to touch on that really quick, because that's his little story that came out. I think it was noteworthy. And it does sound like George R. R. Martin is involved in House of the Dragon. So hopefully that would be a continued involvement.
I would wonder with the Game of Thrones, him not being involved, was that the decision made by the studio? Being for the fact, like, well, we're not doing much off your book now, so do we really need you? But then also, like, even the writers be like, no, let's have George here so he at least can guide us if we kind of want whatever he's thinking, so it doesn't completely deviate from his own thoughts. So yeah, that'd be interesting if they have any, like, we ever hear their side of it, why he wasn't a part of it.
Whosever decision it was made the incorrect decision.
Yeah, probably.
Like, that is the maybe one of the biggest probably regret. Someone has a very large regret over at HBO because of that decision, and they probably don't have a job.
Yeah, and what I think is wild when you say like, oh, the like season 7 and the 8 were rushed, and they didn't even do a full 10 episodes each season. I think that's what's wild too. It's like, so you rush because there wasn't money to do like 3 episodes in, the season 7 and another 4 episodes in season 6, or like, right. What was the deal there?
Why were you rushed when Netflix is out here? I mean, and this is after the fact, but Netflix is out here with Stranger Things going, oh yeah, you really like this? You really like this world? Here's a 2.5 hour episode. Here you go.
Yeah, but now they're like bankrupt because of that, so it is
what it is. But the fans are happy.
Yeah, that's all it matters.
I mean, I don't care that Netflix is bankrupt. I'm happy. I thought it was great. They did good by their fans. I'll stick to that gun. Like, if they're bankrupt, that's their fault. Stop making terrible movies. Double down on your good products.
Well, only a handful of good movies can pay for the rest of those bad movies. You just, it's like spaghetti. You gotta see what sticks when you're done.
Right, and then they make a movie like a Day Shift. That is,
yeah.
That was entertaining to a certain point, and then it was annoying in my opinion. I think I would, like, random off the spot, I would give that movie a 3.5 out of 6. Have you seen that yet?
Not yet.
Day Shift, it features Jamie Foxx. It is on Netflix. It's subpar in my opinion. We'll just leave it at that. They tried, some things worked, most of it didn't. All right, but you didn't come here for that. You came here for more House of the Dragon. Let's get back to House of the Dragon. Let's reel it back in. House of the Dragon is the story of the House Targaryen set 200 years before the events of Game of Thrones. Its creators is Ryan J. Condal and George R. R. Martin. They are tagging him as one of the creators, so good for them. Top cast here. I'm just going to read this off as it goes. Paddy Considine playing King Viserys Targaryen, Emma Darcy, Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen, Matt Smith, Prince Daemon Targaryen, Rhys Ifans playing Otto Hightower, Rhys. We got Steve Toussaint, Lord Corlys Valerian, Eve Best, Princess Rhaenys Valerian, Sonoya Mizuno playing Mysaria, Fabian Franco playing Sir Kriston Cole. I gotta get to, here we are. Millie Alcock playing young Princess Rhaenyra Targaryen, Emily Carey playing Alicent Hightower young. So the young version of Alicent Hightower. Graham McTavish, Sir Harold Westerling, And David Horowitz is the Grand Maestro Milos. I don't think there's anyone else we need to get into quite yet. It's always kind of hard to determine who's going to be important and who's going to die in a Game of Thrones show. So I give you a good amount of cast and crew there. I can't say there's a lot that I know off the top of my head. Matt Smith, I believe, is probably the most well known out of that group of people.
He was the doctor, and then
he was the doctor. Right. So Matt Smith is probably the most well known in that group. I'm sure there are others that people may know from different things, but a pretty good looks like a good cast. I think we're in for. Here's the thing. The same thing happened with Game of Thrones is that whoever they cast will eventually become stars, because that's what happened with a bunch of the Game of Thrones people. IMDb gives the House of the Dragon episode 1 a 9 out of 10, and is the 5th most popular show right now on IMDb, coming out a few days ago. I don't have the Rotten Tomatoes score on here, and Max does love his Rotten Tomatoes score, but I'm not going to give it to him, and he's just going to have to deal with it. So, Mark, before we get into spoiling this, I would love to get your non-spoiler quick reaction and review and rating of this.
I honestly couldn't see a flaw in it, and I know I'm a sucker for giving 6 out of 6s to stuff, but I thought the show was beautiful. So 6 out of 6. I'm just going to go right for it. I don't care.
Wow.
I loved how it opened with a dragon, right? Is that how it opened, or did it open with them going over? It first opened with the prologue. It opened with the prologue, explaining what was happening and where we are in the timeline, and then it went to a dragon. Either way, we still got a dragon very fast, and that's what the fans wanted. We wanted a good dragon, good CGI. So clearly, whoever they're paying to do the CGI aren't Marvel people right now that are being overworked.
They are probably paying a fair wage for their CGI.
And they probably can, because Warner Bros. Discovery had to lay off a bunch of people, so probably can pay those CGI guys or those CGI artists more money. I really loved getting to know some of the new characters. I was totally lost that it was Matt Smith as Daemon. I was it's the dude from, it's the doctor, and it's the guy from Morbius who does that dance. It was my two first thoughts when I saw him. It's not a more perfect casting for Daemon Targaryen.
Yeah, I agree.
And it was kind of interesting, some of the stuff he did that he leads the watch, and kind of the inner workings and dynamics of people, and already getting some important deaths right off the bat, and kind of just slingshotting us into what's potentially going to happen in the show if you haven't read the books. So
I'm very close to your rating. I would give it a 5.9. And here's why I would give it a 5.9. I feel like Game of Thrones episode 1 set such a high standard for starting a story that this didn't quite meet up to that expectation. When I think of Game of Thrones, that episode had everyone. It had character development. It had motivations. It right away you could almost pick who you were really interested in, and then it was very heavy as well. And this episode had a lot of that as well. I think Game of Thrones, the first episode of Game of Thrones, did that slightly better. And that's why I would give that a 6 out of 6. And I would give this a 5.9 out of 6.
And what's wild with that is the first Game of Thrones episode was a true pilot, where some of the designs of the characters changed by the second episode. Where this show clearly was not a pilot. It wasn't made to then sell. HBO was like, we're making this. So I think that's what's really on point with your rating there, just to push that farther.
Right. And that is not a knock at all on this episode. It was a fantastic episode to start a series. Everyone is talking about it. I always kind of gauge things based on, is the radio talking about it? Are the radio DJs talking about it? Because, and it's a terrible gauge of like who's listening, but it's like you could also go by social media and whatnot. But if the radio DJs are talking about it, like,
then everyone's talking about it. Yeah,
everyone is talking about it, kind of thing. And everyone saw Game of Thrones, and we were in a football meeting today, or this week on Monday, and a few coaches were talking about it, guys that I would not say are nerdy at all. So they were talking about it. So if they're talking about it, I came home after that football practice. I was like, guys, we have to do a review on Game of Thrones. Like, and we're like, oh, maybe we make it a Patreon. It's like, no, it's like, hate to break it to you, Game of Thrones is a lot bigger than She-Hulk. I'm just gonna,
and it just proved it with what, almost 10 million viewers the first night,
right?
And like, I'm assuming that 10 million means like people watched it live. Is that what that number was? So like they watched it Sunday night. That many people watched it.
You know, I would assume that it's probably a window of time that people watched it with apps and everything, that the apps have really changed things. I would assume it's like a 10-hour or 24-hour window that people have watched it.
Oh, maybe.
I don't know how that works.
In the app, you can watch it live.
Right.
So yeah, I'm just curious how they gauged that. But yeah, maybe it was the first 24 hours, which is still a lot of people.
If 10 million were watching it all at once, imagine what the number would be in 24 hours. Like, it had to be at like just a ridiculous amount of people.
And it was enough for
watching this.
On Monday for me. The app crashed 3 times. I had to wait until Tuesday to try it again to watch the episode.
I watched it a little later than start time. I watched it about half an hour after it started, and we couldn't get the app to work for a good 5-10 minutes. And when it was working, it was very laggy. There was a lot. So it was a little unfortunate for me that there was some moments where it was very pixelated. And I think that's just, the app just was not ready for that kind of usage. But yeah, it was just great. So we're going to get into our spoiler talk here. So we're going to put our spoiler bumper right here.
This is
Prepare yourself.
an Infinity Bros
Prepare yourself.
spoiler warning.
All right, we are now on the spoiler side of the first episode of House of the Dragon. And Mark, I believe that, so this episode starts where they have the chance, correct me if I'm wrong, to name a woman as the queen, but then decide it was
well, they had 14 people. They said, like, put their name in the hat to be the new ruler, and it came down to 2 Targaryens. At least that's what we learned that what happened. And I forget the relations to that current king, because the king lost his 2 heirs in like a war or something, I think.
So it was Princess Rhaenys Valerian, I believe, was who they had the strongest right to the throne.
Oh, because she was the niece of the king, right? Something like that.
Something like that. So she had the strongest right to the throne, but then it was given to Viserys Targaryen. So you instantly have this Valerian and Targaryen conflict that we've seen from Game of Thrones. Now, obviously, King Viserys, who becomes the king, and we find out later in the episode, didn't really want to become king. They kind of, I got Sean Bean's, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name in the show. Yeah, I'm getting Ned Stark vibes from him, where he doesn't want to be the king. And maybe he's not the greatest king, but he's doing his best, and he really, really relies on his council around him. And we start, and later in the episode, we start to see, like, this council is not cohesive.
Yes, it's not cohesive. Like, there's a lot of, like, obvious bickering that must go on, and like not trusting each other. But yeah, my first thought when it selected that Viserys is the king, and I'm thinking like, oh, the other 2 people are just going to be like the enemies. But no, they have her husband, the Valerian guy, is it Corlys? Carlus?
Lord Corlys Valerian. We'll just go with Lord Corlys.
He's
Lord
part of the
Valerian.
council, so I'm sure he's part of the Navy. He's like the Navy guy. And he talks about like, hey, there's these pirates like attacking in this area, and they just like all laugh him off. And he's just like, so clearly those pirates and the crab eater guy that they talked about is going to be some form of antagonist to these people.
Viserys Targaryen's council that he's using. Otto Hightower's the Hand, played by Rhys Ifans. He's been in other things. I'm looking at his face, and he has been in other things.
He's the kicker in The Replacements.
That's it. Gosh, this picture is 100% that.
And know what? And when I found out who that was, like he looks nothing. Like I'm just like the dude's older.
Could not
now,
tell.
Obviously.
Right.
And he's also I think he's in Little Nicky. He's one of Little Nicky's brothers. So that's where
gosh.
That's the timeline I go with him. Is Little Nicky
absolutely brilliant
and The Replacements. So
brilliant casting.
I was more in when I found out that was him as Otto Hightower.
Lord Valerian is another one of the council. I believe. Gosh, I don't. Here we go. Lionel Strong, I believe, is the other. The bald man in the council. And then I think the most
right is the other guy.
And then the Grand Meister, but I don't know if they're So and then the most I think probably either the fan favorite go like after this episode or the most questionable, the most divisive character from this episode was Prince Daemon Targaryen. Right. Played by Matt Smith, who we talked about, who was the doctor, who I didn't even pick up on that. That was the doctor right away. He played this role so well, such a balancing act. Because the first thing we see him in is he's sitting in the chair. Rhaenyra Targaryen comes in, sees him sitting in the Iron Throne, just with they took the sword thing and like when like swords, more swords, it was wild.
Looks like in Game of Thrones,
yeah. So he's sitting at the throne, and then gives Rhaenyra, I think I'm saying that right, Rhaenyra Targaryen that necklace. So you instantly get like, oh, this guy, he cares for his niece. Like, oh, okay. So this guy...
There is some former relationship that have come down the line. He might side with his niece because there was some bond that they have. But he might not side with other family members or other people that are aligned with the king. That's what I gathered from that opening part with them.
We learned that Daemon Targaryen, the prince, the brothers, or the king's brother, is leading the Night's Watch, which it seems like he's one of the best Night's Watch commanders that they've ever had. He has these men chanting his name, pounding their chests as he's walking through them. He definitely has extreme leadership, maybe military leadership qualities that has quite the following. And then we find that he is going to be the commander of the Gold Cloaks in King's Landing. And we find that out, and they decided that the city essentially is filled with too much bad. And they go out and I forget the number, but they just start chopping people's hands off.
Who are thieves?
Cutting, what's that?
Cutting hands off from thieves, because they're basically going to these criminals, and like their whole goal is to strike fear in committing crimes, because like this is how they're going to punish you, and you're not just going to be able to go back to King's Landing as a free person.
Daemon Targaryen has the armor that a 12-year-old boy draws when he wants it. I want a Dragon Knight armor. It's legit like Yu-Gi-Oh! Armor that he's wearing. It has like horns and stuff. He chops a guy's head off. They kill a bunch of people. And then he comes back
to chopped off.
Dude gets his wiener chopped off. He doesn't have that anymore.
Yep, that's on your, that can be checked off your list of things you've seen on television.
Yep, doesn't have to worry about that anymore. So that all goes down, and then he comes and he's now part of this council. And Otto Hightower, right off the bat, is not a fan. That's where we start to see we start to see what we thought was a cohesive unit separate in this King's Council. Daemon definitely brought a different a different vibe
doing
to
his
this
best
council.
to undermine, I think, the King's inner circle. That's what we kind of start gathering at this point.
And then they start questioning, are we making the right decision? As much as it may be tough to assume, if you start killing people for doing bad things, other people are going to fall in line. And he says something to the effect of, if enough people are scared, they'll follow the rules, kind of thing. And I believe Viserys says something like, I can't lead. Like, is it going to work? How many people do you have to kill for this to work? And he just goes, we'll see. Like, we'll see how many people have to, be murdered in the streets before people just kind of get in line. So you get all that scene. They're enjoying, or they're not enjoying, but they are. You kind of have this. You start to see that this inner circle is not cohesive. They are not not all is well in King's Landing, and the Targaryens maybe aren't as powerful as you thought, but they do have dragons. We get a lot of stuff on Rhaenyra Targaryen, who is basically, did you like Daenerys Targaryen? Here you go.
Yeah, here's the upgrade.
So she already has a dragon. She flies in to this show on a dragon's back.
So we know she's well versed in dragon riding.
Big dragon rider. So the main
we got to know that when she's probably in battle and she's flying around this dragon, that she's not a novice to it.
Look, I get it. You're lazy, and coffee from the grocery store is just as good as ordering from somewhere like Mini World's Tavern, right? Wrong! That's dumb, and you should feel so dumb for thinking that. Does your local grocery store donate a portion of their proceeds to charity? Actually, if they do that, that is kind of awesome. But we guarantee that Mini World's Tavern does that. Besides, it's not like your grocery store provides an amazing monthly blend with added RPG-themed bonuses. That's a limited edition Mini World's Tavern exclusive, baby. They are the online coffee brand that's perfect for game night. Guys, I should know. Before every podcast and every time I go live on Twitch, I fill an entire bathtub full of Great Old One, and I do my best Lord Harkonnen impression. Guys, grab a bag for yourself right now. Go to www.miniworldstavern.com/theinfinitybros, all one word. And guess what? You're going to save yourself 10% at checkout.
So the king's wife is pregnant. They decide that they are going to hold a tournament, a jousting tournament, kind of in her honor, because she's due soon. They know for sure that the child is coming, and Viserys Targaryen needs an heir because he only has Rhaenyra, and they don't want a queen on the throne. They want a king. So they're in preparation that he's going to have a son. They are having a big old tournament. Daemon Targaryen's part of that tournament. And during that tournament, I thought it was interesting that they made it a point to mention that none of the men fighting and none of the people watching have been involved in any wars. It's been a peacetime. So Viserys Targaryen is a peacetime king. So all of these men, essentially how it's portrayed, are bloodthirsty. And they are looking for reasons to fight. So they go through this jousting. Apparently in jousting, if you get knocked off your horse and you're grumpy enough, you just get to try to kill the other guy. So that's how we get some of our Game of Thrones violence. And I think it worked really, really well here.
Yeah, and it showed the brutality of that stuff actually really happening in medieval times. So that's what would happen. And you get struck in the face with the sword, or I forget the thing with the ball, the chainmail, what is that thing called? I don't know. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna rip flesh apart. So
yeah, not good feeling things. And during this tournament, we get a whisper from the Grand Meister Viserys Targaryen goes away. His wife is in labor, or he announces that his wife is in labor, and then he goes and is with his wife. This, I think, was the now we're getting into. We thought the men killing each other was brutal. Now we're getting into the real meat and potatoes of the brutality of this episode, and that is Viserys Targaryen is given and basically an ultimatum. You got to think this is medieval times. They have milk of the poppy, and that's pretty much it for pain purposes, and they have nothing to stop the bleeding. So she is in labor.
The technology they probably do cesarean,
right?
Either
they don't know how to do a C-section. The maestro tells them in far lands there is a procedure that can be done to save the child, but the amount of blood loss will kill the queen. So Viserys is given the ultimatum: you can let them both die. Like 100%, there's no chance either survives. You let them both die.
Yep.
Or you get to make the decision that you're going to, lack of a better term, cut your wife open and save your child, and your wife dies anyway. So this king is now, and they've made a very good point to this. I think the storytelling was really well done, that they clearly made it that they are in love. This is not a oh, I'm forced to be with this woman kind of thing, and she's just there to carry my seed. Like, they are actually in love. This is actually a king and a queen who care for each other and want the best for each other. Mark, just how
I think he had to make it.
Go ahead.
What are you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, how did that scene? What were you feeling now as a new father? What were you feeling in that scene? And how do you feel that affected maybe everyone watching?
I think you're right. I do think we, as a viewer, you should have got that it wasn't just like, oh, they're married because of royalty reasons. It definitely felt like they had some love connection, and it looked like it was a tough decision for him to make. But obviously, it's like, he's gonna. I mean, if you're probably given that choice of like, well, you don't do nothing and they both die, or you do this route and probably one will live, that choice will have to be made. I'm sure no one's going to make the choice where you just both die, let both people die. So I don't know, that was rough. But yeah, I think he made the I mean, it might have been, you could say he made it for selfish reasons, but like both of them would have died if he didn't make the decision. So
I would argue that his wife probably would have agreed that that's the right decision to make. And maybe I'm wrong, but
it did show how much power a king has there, where he makes this decision. No one like counteracts that. They just go right to work. I think that's what also showed brutality and like loss of humanity a little bit on that like level of the time frame. It's kind of imitating the medieval times and how much pull the king has. Like the king's word is just like, yep, we go do it. No questions asked.
And they didn't say anything to the wife. They just start
exactly
restraining her to cut her open. It's a brutal scene. I think if thank goodness none of us will ever have to be in that scenario ever, or I hope that no one ever has to be in that scenario. But at least to me, it would make sense. It would make sense that you would, if I can save one of them, I'm going to try to save one of them. And I would assume that that his wife wouldn't disagree if she was in his shoes. Like, obviously no one wants to die, but I assume that she would probably be okay with it.
I think a lot of viewers would have wished there was some communication between them.
Mm-hmm.
Versus him just jumping into it. But I think that just tells, that's why I think he goes a little bit to the selfishness, though, a little bit of him picking the child because he wants the heir without knowing the sex, though. That was another thing that's brought up. It's like they didn't know if it was going to be a boy or girl.
Yeah, he's got a 50-50 shot if it's going to be another girl or a boy. And but he has to take that chance because that's the pressure he's feeling from his supporters. Like, he is feeling like I need a son. Otherwise, you know, the Valerians are going to take over, or Daemon, or Otto Hightower is going to take over, kind of thing. And obviously, who people in power want to stay in power, and they want their families to stay in power. But I agree. I think a lot of people might be upset that why didn't he just tell her? Because instead he goes, they're going to take the baby out. That's all he says. They're going to take the baby out now. And he just goes, it's okay. It's
yoinked
okay.
down, and then like clear fear on her face goes on, and then they get the baby out, and the Grand Maester's holding it, and it's crying, like it's
crying. It's alive. He says it's a boy, and they're thrilled. It's a quick moment of joy. And in Game of Thrones, for all the things that they've struggled with, Game of Thrones has timing down to a science. They give you this little glimpse of joy, and then in the very next scene, we see the his wife is bandaged up and is on the wood pile, and then it pans down, and then you also see the child.
Because we get the Grand Maester's like face, like, you know, looking at the baby, like we're supposed to indicate, like, is the baby okay? And then then we go to that. Which then this is my little into the weeds, knowing from Game of Thrones, and knowing what else
we're going into the
season.
Weeds.
Yeah.
Oh.
Are we 100% sure that child's dead and not somewhere else? And it's all a plan. It's all a Game of Thrones for Otto Hightower to infiltrate and get someone on his side in succession for the throne.
Now that is an interesting point, because you're right. There is a scene in between there where all the other members start whispering to each other, and they all leave the jousting. They all leave the tournament. So that is a very interesting point. That was such a small moment that when I watched it, I was like, what's going on there? And then everything else happens, and you just kind of forget about it. But I think you're onto something. I don't know. They might have, if Otto Hightower had the child murdered. It's
Game of Thrones.
Maybe?
There's got to be a swerve. There's got to be something that's found out that clearly someone in his, like, you know, if it's him or someone else that is working for Otto Hightower, like, you know, killed something's got to happen. Like, they're, you know, I'd be very surprised if none of them's in on trying to overthrow the king.
Maybe the storyline is too simple, but it makes a lot of sense for it to be Otto Hightower, because Otto is also the one who wants Daemon Targaryen gone.
Well, right? Then there's also the scene where he sends his daughter to like go to the chamber of the king after his wife died, because
let's wait 1 sec before we get there. That I want to get. I'm going to get to that here quickly, but I want to hit on the burial of, well, okay, I guess not the cremation, I suppose.
The funeral ceremony.
The funeral ceremony. So we're at this funeral. We get the pan down that we see that the baby has also died.
Yeah, they're on a funeral pyre.
Right. And Lord Viserys can't say the word, and Daemon goes behind Rhaenyra and goes, he's waiting for you, because he can't muster up the courage or he can't let go. And I think that speaks to how in love, I think that's because of how in love he was, and also him realizing that's my heir, and now I've lost my heir, I've lost my wife, kind of thing. And then so he's waiting for Rhaenyra to say the words, because he can't say it. So they have, to paint the picture, they have the dragon. I blank on the dragon's name, but he's on top of the hill, and he's just waiting for Rhaenyra to give the signal to light them on fire, to cremate the bodies. And I thought that scene was important. It was quick. There's lots of quick things that happen in episode 1, but I thought that scene was important because Viserys didn't say that to Rhaenyra. Daemon Daemon and Viserys have this connection that he knew that that Viserys couldn't say it, and that Rhaenyra had to say it, and Daemon gave her that edge. And I think that speaks to the bigger picture that they are extremely close as brothers, even though they are very different.
Yep.
So then we get to then we get to the scene that you were talking about, where Otto Hightower sends his daughter the night of Viserys's, the night that he has to like cremate his wife and child, and sends his daughter to his,
like, the daughter's also, what is she to Rhaenyra again? Like, she's like almost like a handmaid. Like, she's not like a maiden because she's, you know, of highborn, but she's like we get scenes where they're like going over books and like trying to teach Rhaenyra stuff, and then we get a little bit like Rhaenyra doesn't care, but obviously she knows all this stuff. So like she's very smart. She wants to be a fighter, Rhaenyra. So yes, just a little backstory on that.
So as she is, sorry, let me get her name here. I believe it's Alicent. I believe I'm saying that right.
Yeah,
Alicent Hightower, played by Emily Carey in this episode. I also think it's interesting that it says young here. It says young for a lot of these. So maybe in episode 2 or further along in the line, all of these characters are going to get older fast. That's I think an interesting IMDb cast thing to point out. But yeah, so Otto is clearly playing a Game of Thrones, I think. So she goes up there, she does her, and they're like best friends. I think they call it something in Game of Thrones in Westeros. I'm blanking on the name as well, but they do have they have a thing that they call it for when there's a woman that is like, they're always connected and they're teaching each other. So you get that scene, and then you get Matt Smith, Prince Daemon Targaryen, in a whorehouse essentially, and they are drinking, having a merry time, and Daemon's men seem to believe that now he is next in line. He has the best right to the throne. But you see Daemon sitting there silently, not saying anything until he's asked to speak. And we come to find out through who of course, Otto Hightower and his minions, that Daemon Targaryen said the line that he toasted to the king for a day.
And refresh me, did he actually say that? Do we see him say that?
I did not remember seeing him say that. So I think, yeah.
Okay, because I was trying to remember that when you were talking about that, and yeah, says the king for the day, referring to Viserys' son who died.
So Mark, I want to ask here: what do you think Daemon's intentions are?
I don't know, because we get initially that he's like, is he bloodthirsty, or does he think this is this is the way he would just rule? Would he be a bad king? I'm so invested in him as a character, especially how he's being portrayed by Matt Smith, that I kind of feel like we're supposed to get set up that he's supposed to be a bad guy, but I think it's going to come full circle and he's going to be a good guy. And watch me, eat my words down the line. He's like murdering a bunch of people, but it'll be very interesting to see the kind of progression the character has for Daemon.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. I think they've balanced the good and the bad with him during this episode so well that I think there's some people that think he's the villain, he's the bad guy. Then I think there's some people that think he's the redemption character. He kind of has
he's just the Deadpool for this show. He's really not a good or bad guy. Yeah, but he'll do the right thing type of situation.
He's Jon Snow. People kind of like him, but he's eventually going to get on people's nerves. Yeah, I mean that could maybe he's Jon Snow. Maybe he's Jon Snow. But I think it's very easy to paint the guy who's wearing a black dragon helmet and armor as like the bad guy. They tried, and I think I'm kind of with you here. I think they really tried to paint him as the bad guy,
or they're just trying to paint him. Well, yes, and I also think maybe a little more arrogant, and I don't know. But yeah, it's yeah.
See, I saw, in my opinion, I saw a very thoughtful character. He is patient. He is thoughtful with his words. He is very calculated, and that can be perceived, I feel like, in a few different ways.
And that's why I think Otto sees him as a threat to the throne, because I feel like we're going to learn that Otto Hightower is. I just strongly believe he's going to try to overthrow Viserys. So I would bet my money on that.
And this goes further into the episode, just a minute further into the episode, where Otto tells Viserys about him saying the line, "The king for a day." He has Daemon come into the throne room, which just has to be the most intimidating thing ever. A man with a sword sitting on a throne made of swords, surrounded by more swords, with multiple gold cloaks.
But Daemon's not intimidated by that. I think that's what we kind of get, though. But I think that's the brother relationship, I think, is to him. Like, he's not threatened by his brother.
And I thought it was an important line, and it is another quick line where where Viserys goes, "Did you say it? Like, you're out, like my wife and child are dead. I have nothing, and you're out drinking at a whorehouse." And Daemon goes, we mourn in our own ways, brother, kind of thing. And I feel like that's impactful, because I think that's also true for a lot of people. And in the scene that we got to see of him in that whorehouse, he is sitting. He's doing kind of that calculated.
Not participating.
He's not participating. Right. He's letting his men participate. He's sitting there, fully clothed and just not. He's doing the calculated thing. He's thinking. We don't know if it's like, we don't know. Is he calculating his next move, or is he generally sad for his brother? And I think that's the fine balance, because as soon as someone says like they're waiting for you to talk kind of thing, he gets up and he speaks to his men, and he kind of buys into them being thrilled. So it's a very interesting balancing act that they are doing with Prince Daemon Targaryen. Gosh, I think I'm kind of with you. I think Otto Hightower is like, these two together aren't safe, because maybe we're wrong, but maybe he thinks Daemon has too much pull on Viserys, because it's also mentioned that Viserys is a very easily swayed king.
It is Viserys said, yeah, just have Daemon be the succession. It was the rest of the council, or the round, or I forget what they call it off the top of my head. But that they want, like, Viserys wanted him to be the succession. Everyone's like, oh, no, we can't, no, he can't lead. He's not good.
Right.
And this whole time we see that Daemon's listening in on this. So, like, he's hearing what these people are saying. So.
Which, I mean, keep going with the theme, is that he's calculated. Like,
yeah. So
this guy knows what's going on. Like, so that makes it so interesting.
I just wish I could remember if he did say it and we saw that. Because it seems like something like that he wouldn't say.
Right.
For being as calculated as he is.
Right, but he also seems like...
Or he knows that to find out who his enemies are. Like, who's going to out him.
That could be it too. But he also seems like the type of man that's... He feels like he has this relationship with his brother that, like... If my brother really thinks I would say something like that and he won't believe my word, then that is what it is. I'm too prideful I shouldn't have to defend myself, kind of thing. Like, if I didn't say that, and I'm not going to defend myself for not saying it. So they want him sent off to his wife in, the high up tower. I'm blanking on the name of it, but they want him almost as far away as possible without going to the north. Basically, he's not going to the Starks, but he's going very, very close to the Starks. That's the next furthest away area. But I mean, he's been away anyway because he's been at the Watch. So Mark, I really expected in this scene, because this is a very Game of Thrones thing, and we learned this early in the episode that he is in charge of the Gold Cloaks. I really thought that he was going to, and this is where I was kind of in that same mindset of like, Daemon is the bad guy. I thought he was going to have his Gold Cloaks turn around and kill Viserys, or maybe not kill him, but like show the power that Daemon actually has by having that camaraderie with his men. Did you get that vibe at all?
I didn't. I didn't think that was going to happen.
Okay, well, we're not on the same link then. I thought it was interesting that they made it a point to show all of that connection with the Gold Cloaks, and then to have 4 Gold Cloaks standing in front of the king.
It was Dragonstone he was sent to.
Dragonstone. Okay. I guess I'm not.
So I feel like you gotta have like a map of this whole area to like kind of just figure out how far are they going. So he
is then sent away, and that, I believe that ends our episode, if I'm not mistaken.
No, didn't we get? Am I missing the something? Whole Viserys deciding to choose Rhaenyra as his heir? Yeah.
Goodness gracious! Of course,
I don't think it ended there. I think it.
No. Yeah. Then we get to the council again, and they have to make a decision on an heir, and Lord Corlys Valerian is like, Rhaenys Valerian has the strongest claim to the throne.
He was the first one to say it when they initially had that round table discussion about it, and then doubles down. Yeah.
And then Viserys has his moment of clarity. He's like, Rhaenyra is most fit to be queen, and he apologizes for not seeing it.
Because they have that dialogue around that Draken skull.
And then that, I feel like that was an important dialogue too. Was, what do you see when you see the dragon? And she's like, I see our family, kind of thing. And it's so now we're neck deep in the Game of Thrones. This is Viserys is a king who didn't want to be king, but wants to make sure that Targaryens stay on the throne. So he's putting Rhaenyra as the next in line to be on the throne, which paints a giant target on Rhaenyra's back.
Exactly. Like, this is going to be, now houses are going to come out of the woodwork to either wed her,
right,
or kill her to get her out of success. Because I think that'll be the next. She's the one who has a target on her back, not the king. So it'll be interesting to see who goes after her. Like, is that where Daemon has to come to her aid, or what's going to go on?
So we get, it's very interesting. They did a lot of really, really good things in this first episode. A lot of good story building and a lot of good character development. Like I said, I gave it a 5.9 out of 6. Great episode. I have a few more questions. And we kind of talked about this in our pregame. Do you think that we're ever going to see someone connected, or whether it's a family member or like you had mentioned, like the sprites or whatever they're called, or the Night King? Well, are we going to see a connection at all from Game of Thrones?
I think we got like a Stark and Baratheon connection, which but then we got
those are houses. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. I get. Yeah. So, but it's because we talked about in the Patreon part of this episode. Like what could still be alive, and I said the sprites or the three-eyed raven, but I don't really, or like the Night King. I don't really think you're going to bring any of those people in. I would imagine you're not, because like how do they help move the story along at this point?
Because this is, so for people that may not know, this is set 200 years before Game of Thrones and 172 years before Jamie Lannister kills the Mad King.
Yeah.
So it would be very difficult. There would have to be either a very old person or something that would have to connect these two stories.
And this is like they're just not going to do connecting, because it's like there's so much time, even in Game of Thrones, where people don't believe in dragons because there's been so much time. So I'm sure for how long they do this season, this series, they're gonna end it with dragons being killed off, and then those 3 dragon eggs probably being like shipped off. That Daenerys eventually gets. So,
it's interesting for how sustainable can this series be? You have 172 years, I suppose, to play with.
I say you could probably do the same amount of seasons. You
probably could.
That book, the House of Dragon book's huge.
Do you think so? I think it would be very interesting if you would do some time jumps here and there to make it 8
they're
seasons.
doing time jumps because they have
they have the young tags on there.
Yeah.
I think it'd be very interesting if by the end of all of this House of the Dragon, if it ends with Jaime Lannister killing the Mad King.
See, now I was just thinking about that. It's like, do you just follow? But that'd be introducing a whole new line of characters where it's like, do you just tell this block of story over like a 20 to 30 year period, and then eventually does HBO Max or HBO or Warner Brothers Discovery do a season or a series over like that era of time where the Mad King gets killed? Because I would love that.
I think that's what you do. I think that's how you do this. And I think you plan for like large time jumps where it's okay. Let's say, I don't know how any of this goes. So let's say Rhaenyra becomes
that story would be a House of Dragon storyline necessarily, but it kind of would be. But so like it'll be interesting.
But it all falls under the Game of Thrones tag. I don't know if it would be but it would be House of Dragon because the Mad King was a Targaryen.
Yes, he was. So yes.
So you could say like let's do 2 seasons where let's say it's Rhaenyra is the queen, and then after 2 seasons you get like there's a good 20 or 40 year time jump where things are, it's another peaceful time kind of thing.
If they're gonna
the
do
thrones have settled.
Thrones, there's no more game. It's just the thrones. If you're gonna do time jumps like that, you gotta be spot on with your storytelling and how you show it. Like that's a pretty progressive way of doing things. Where you just you basically recast everybody.
Right. It would be an incredible way to connect to the Game of Thrones that we started with. And it would I think, and I said this before, I think it would have to end with Jaime Lannister killing the Mad King. Because that's how everything started. Because so you just end, and like we would all know what the finale would be.
So what you're telling me is you're ending the House of Dragons, no matter if you get like 7 seasons out of it. The 7th season, and you're doing these time jumps. The last episode is those events, and it ends with Jaime killing the Mad King, and maybe you get a little bit afterwards, like a little like 10 minutes of what how everything kind of starts.
You would get where everyone goes and who's in power, and that would be about it. But you rush
it
goes
back
right into Game of Thrones.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
So maybe that's putting the cart before the horse. But I just imagine eventually connecting all of this. And maybe you don't call it, maybe it's not the House of the Dragon. Maybe every time they decide to do a time jump, they name it something different, because then you can remarket it in, HBO, or they want to make money.
They already call it Game of Thrones House of Dragon. You kind of do it.
So you could call it Game of Thrones House of.
What's that? I'm blanking on the show. American Horror Story. You just, you have the main title, and then
that's a great example. Yeah, that's a great example of
bam,
like
new show.
Right. Like it's
True Crime on HBO. They've already done that. There you go.
Exactly. There are ways to do this where you can connect this entire story. And I think
it comes back to this. You have to execute on the story, execute on the writing, and execute on that who's in it,
The casting,
actors.
yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and like you can bat 75% to kind of push you to the next season, but yeah, if you drop the ball in one of those seasons, it kind of gonna end it.
Right, and it would have to be fairly quickly. Like this would all have to connect within the next. Game of Thrones it started in 2011, it ended in 2020.
2019.
2019.
If you remember, Infinity Bros podcast started a month before.
Our first episode was the start of season 8, I believe. It was me and Max. Max hates that episode. It was me and Max, the first episode, 2019 of season 8. So yeah, you're right. So it would have to be by 2030, 2031 that it would start connecting. Because I think I think a 20-year gap where Game of Thrones and basically the MCU and Game of Thrones just battle it out for like most relevance. I think that's doable, but I don't think you can't stretch this out more than that. You have like the plan has to already like we're thinking of it on a podcast. They have had to have that plan, in 2020. Like, and they're like, if we succeed here, we can do this and this and this and this.
But then who knows what Warner Discovery is going to do, because a show like this is already being pushed out because it was already done. So it'll be up to them. I mean, we just heard, some of that DC news where they only had enough money to do 2 movies the rest of the year.
Oh, Mark, that's a whole nother pod. That's a whole nother podcast that we cannot get into on this episode.
Listeners have already been here enough.
We can't get into that on this episode, unfortunately. But gosh, there's a lot of potential for these type of shows. The last question I have, because it seemed like a focal point that we were supposed to like keep our eye on. It's Sir Criston Cole, played by Fabian Frankel, is the man who defeats Daemon Targaryen in the jousting event. Do you have any inkling, any thoughts on what his role might be moving forward?
What was his last name again? Like, what house was he part of?
He Cole. He's not a part of any house because remember. He's the first guy that goes. Yep. So he's the first guy that goes and defeats. I believe it wasn't Hightower. That was Daemon that defeated the other Hightower boy. But Cole, like I think he had to win his way in, kind of thing, as a commonborn. And he goes on to defeat the prince, first in jousting and then in hand-to-hand combat. And then he asks the favor of Rhaenyra Targaryen. What do you think his role is? Do you have any thoughts on what he might be besides maybe just a love interest?
I just like my mind goes right to like a Game of Thrones storyline where it's like, yeah, he's a love interest and then is like brutally murdered in front of her, like type of situation. So, yeah, it might be no more than that. I was just actually in that scene. I'm just more surprised that Daemon didn't like sneakily kill him. So I think that shows some compassion on Daemon's part, which we're like, yeah, we're supposed to live believe that he's the bad guy, but I think he's not going to be the bad guy. So maybe Daemon
had a chance.
Yeah, I just totally thought like back to the Game of Thrones storyline. Yep, he's going to like take his sword, cut his legs off, stab him in the face. But nope, didn't happen. So.
And leading up to that, we had kind of thought that Daemon would be that type of guy because it was just after he had done the whole gold cloak thing and murdered a bunch of people in the streets.
He murdered criminals.
Criminals aren't people.
Potentially murdered already some people.
Oh.
He's trying to keep the streets clean and safe from murderers and thieves and rapers. So, I mean, did he really do something bad? I don't know. That's
what do you think? Where do you fall on that line? Should we cut off the hands of people who steal?
I mean, what does it say in the Bible?
That's a valid point. It's a valid point. Bible says
it depends on where you want to stand your moral beliefs behind, I guess.
What's the Bible? What is it? My left eye causes me to sin. Cut it out. Is that it? Is that where you're going with this?
Yep,
there it is. Okay.
We should live in a world of sea and in Bird Box. Here to hear first, folks.
There it is. All right, that's the Infinity Bro podcast. What a great episode. I'm really excited for more House of the Dragon. I think there's a lot of story to be told here. Really invested in these characters. Be looking out for more reviews on Game of Thrones. Be looking out for more reviews on She-Hulk, which I believe we are recording tomorrow night. Some of you are recording tomorrow night. Some of you will probably get this on the weekends. Check us out wherever you find your podcast. We're also on TikTok, Instagram. We have Samsung podcast, apparently Apple, Google, wherever you get your podcast. You can type in the Infinity Bros. Check us out there. Check us on all the socials. Mark, thanks so much for joining me on my first venture as host.
I was glad to be here. I'm sure the rest of the boys will be ecstatic hearing you lead the way.
I would love for everyone to leave a review on any of the podcast sites, and don't review the episode. Review how I did as a host. Make that what your review is, and give me stars depending on how you think I did. That determines if I get to feed my children next month, and if Max will hug me on Saturday. So please do that. I would love to get a hug from Max. I would love to, my kids would love to eat in the month of September. It's been a long time since I've ate. So please check us out on all the socials. Leave us a review. Let me know how we did. And yeah, that we're gonna call it quits on another episode of the Infinity Bros podcast. All right, love you 3000. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Infinity Bros podcast. You can find the Infinity Bros on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at the Infinity Bros. Feel free to send listener feedback via email at infinitybrospodcast@gmail.com.